to order the Tuesday, February 25th, 2025 HRA Board Meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any edits or changes? If none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Hughie, okay, and second by Mua. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes, okay, 6-0. Approval of the minutes. Approval of the February 11th, 2025 HRA Board Meeting minutes. Are there any edits or changes? If none, may I have a motion to approve the February 11th HR Board Meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Wooten and second by Doblinger. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Next item is organizational business, and we will have an update on home ownership programs.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Anna Salvador, Assistant HRA Administrator. This presentation is intended to provide an overview of current homeownership related programming that the HRA is involved in. As there are upcoming items later this year that are associated with this program, we thought it would be good to establish a foundation on current program statuses and kind of the full range of things we're working on within the homeownership umbrella. There are no action items from this presentation. It's purely informational. So when designing and evaluating the homeownership programming, we keep in mind the following guiding principles. Developing multiple pathways to homeownership for Bloomington residents, reducing the homeownership gap between BIPOC and white households, and then more on the physical or built environment side of things. It's increasing the overall stock of ownership housing within the city, particularly around affordable homeownership opportunities, and also preserving the existing stock of ownership housing within the city. Homeownership interventions fall under 4 kind of broad categories. My presentation this evening is really going to focus on the education and financial assistance programs, but I did want to touch briefly on the other 2 buckets, which are development and homeownership preservation. Under the development bucket, the biggest one obviously is the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program, which came before this board earlier this year. That program is rolling out, and we have that first RFP coming relatively soon. Again, 9030 Park, which is another thing that this board was heavily involved in, is also in process right now, hoping to start construction in the spring. And then lastly, our ongoing partnership with Homes Within Reach, which this has historically been funded through CDBG dollars. We provide some funding for acquisition and rehabilitation of existing home ownership units to be sold then at affordable prices. And then within homeownership preservation, this is really where the rehab loan program fits into the homeownership umbrella of programs. And then we also do have a number of agreements that extend the reach of our rehab programming. The first one being one with Center for Energy and Environment, which works on energy efficiency improvements on homes throughout the city, and then Senior Community Services with their home program, and Habitat for Humanity with their A Brush with Kindness program, all kind of still within that rehab program kind of components. And then lastly, I did want to touch on the home improvement areas, or the HIA program, which also falls within this homeownership preservation. A key project that is utilizing this right now is the Heights, which I know we'll hear about later tonight, so I won't spend a ton of time on that. So again, this presentation is focusing on those first 2 buckets. The first program I just want to highlight is the Journey to Homeownership workshops. These were established initially in 2023, and these are short, kind of initial workshops that are offered in Somali, Spanish, and English throughout the year. They're 1 to 2 hours, and it's really just an introduction to the home buying process and an opportunity to get connected to further resources. That includes first-time home buyer courses, one-on-one counseling, and get an introduction of the HCV Homeownership program and the Rental Homes for Future Home Buyers program. This initial workshop is required for both our Rental Homes for Future Home Buyers participants and our HCV Homeownership participants. This year, we're hoping to add additional partners to expand the reach of these workshops and also to dig in a little deeper and focus more on the follow-up one-on-one counseling after kind of the bridge between, okay, I've attended this initial workshop, what's my next step, and focusing resources there a little bit more in the agreements or contracts we work with through the Journey to Homeownership program. And another thing that I just want to flag with this that'll be new in 2025 is incorporating post-purchase counseling into this model as well. That's a requirement of the HCV Homeownership program in particular, and so we really wanted to make sure that that was something that was available since it is a requirement of that program. As a next step after Journey to Homeownership, we have also partnered with Project for Pride in Living on home stretch courses, and this is the more in-depth 8-hour HUD-approved home buyer education course. This course is often required for most down payment assistance programs, and we also require it for our rental homes participants and HCV homeownership participants. You have seen these totals in our last meeting and just in terms of outcomes from 2024, but I did just want to highlight that for the courses that were offered here in Bloomington, we did have 30 households who attended those courses, and 2 households purchased a home after participating in the home stretch programming. I'm going to switch gears now and talk about another education kind of focused program, which is the Rental Homes for Future Home Buyers program. Again, this is we offer affordable rent to support a pathway to homeownership for households in 21 rental units in the city. Included in this program is annual coaching with staff and, again, education on homeownership goals, and that's really where the Journey to Homeownership and home stretch courses tie into this. We see the one-on-one coaching that we're kind of building out a little bit more this year as another key critical tool for our rental homes participants. Since 1993, when the program was originally founded, we've had 61 households purchase a home, and this will be coming back to the board later this year, which is a comprehensive review of the administrative plan for this program. Next, we're kind of moving now into the financial assistance kind of bucket of programs. The first one being HCV Homeownership. This is a relatively new program for the HRA. We have our first household that should be closing in the next 2 weeks, so it's very exciting. But again, relatively new program that we're rolling out. I think a few key things with this program to note. This is in order to be eligible for this program, you have to be an active Housing Choice Voucher Program participant in Bloomington. So again, the scope or audience of this program is pretty narrow. It's not unlike some of the other programs I've previously discussed. This one's really not open to the general public of Bloomington. The first few steps within this program are really led by the program participant, and that includes completing the education requirements, getting qualified for a mortgage, and applying for down payment assistance. Obviously, staff supports and serves as a connector to those households that are working through this process. But really where HRA staff really come into play is after a household has had an offer approved on a house and they're going through kind of that closing process. We, again, review eligibility for the program, do an income analysis, and also complete a HQS inspection of the unit, which is the same inspection that we do on our rental vouchers. And then we enter into a HAP contract, or a housing assistance payments contract, directly with the household. So this is a shift from a traditional voucher that typically that contract is signed between us and the property or the landlord. In this instance, we sign it directly with the tenant, and then we make our housing assistance payments directly to the household that they then use to pay towards their mortgage. The calculation in terms of our portion of assistance is really similar to that under the voucher or traditional voucher program. Really the only exception is we also add an additional allowance for maintenance needs. So in addition to a utility allowance, they also receive, or the calculation incorporates a maintenance allowance as well. That's the kind of the nuance there. So that assistance is guaranteed for the first 15 years that they reside in that unit, as long as they remain on top of their family obligations under the program. And one of those being, or most critically, being the post-purchase counseling that I mentioned before. So we did have 2 households get really close to completing the process in 2024. And like I said, one is really close to closing. We're hoping that happens in the next few weeks here. In 2025, we're really focusing on targeted engagement with households who have already expressed interest and or who meet program qualifications, whether that be income or other kind. They've indicated an interest in homeownership programming in the past. Again, because one, this program is focused on current HCV participants, and also our current admin plan only allows for up to 5 vouchers per year. The reason for that is these vouchers are funded through our annual allocation, so we don't get additional funds from HUD for these vouchers, so we want to be cognizant of our utilization across the program when facilitating this program. The last financial assistance program I want to touch on tonight is down payment assistance. We did have a historical partnership with NeighborWorks, and this was funded through American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Through this, we funded just over $218,000 of down payment assistance, which averages out to about $10,400 per award, I guess is the best word. And like I said, these funds have already fully been expended. This was a one-time source of funding. And so this program with our partnership with NeighborWorks currently is kind of at a close, but we are rolling out a new down payment assistance program in partnership with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, as this board is aware. And we anticipate there will be about 25 households served through this program over the 5 years of that agreement with Habitat for Humanity. I think the nice nuance here is the anticipated sources of funding for this program with Twin Cities Habitat is hopefully a much more sustaining source of funding, so there are more opportunities to have this be function less as a one-time funding source and more as an ongoing source potentially. And then I just wanted to quickly put this all in big picture and highlight the outreach and targeted engagement that is done through these various programs that I've highlighted tonight, because some of them are open to the general public and then some of them have a really targeted audience. First being Journey to Homeownership and Homestretch. Again, these are open to the public, and really how they're relevant to this group is that they're hosted in Bloomington, and we do tie some of our rental homes and HCV homeownership participation to these programs, but again, it's open to the general public. A lot of the promotion happens with our partners who lead those workshops, but we do also advertise on the city website and through citywide communications about these opportunities. Rental Homes for Future Homebuyers is filled through an existing waiting list, and when that waiting list is open and we're accepting applications, we advertise that availability on Housing Link and also on the city website. For down payment assistance, this again would be open to income qualifying Bloomington residents, and the HCV homeownership program is available, like I mentioned, to current program participants only. For citywide communications, I just want to highlight every March we do kind of a fuller spread of HRA programs and initiatives in the briefing. And I think that's one key way that we promote a lot of these opportunities that are happening on an ongoing basis. Upcoming items to this board in 2025. I know I mentioned a few of them throughout the presentation, but there's a lot of policy and manual updates coming to you this year, both for the rental homes program, the rehab loan program, and also the HIA manual update. And then HCV homeownership program guidelines, those are baked into our admin plan for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that, again, is an annual item that comes before the board for consideration. And then, just updates around the down payment assistance program with Habitat are anticipated throughout the year as well. That concludes my presentation. I'll turn it over for questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess, and this might be a question that many of us have, but how are decisions at the national level affecting these programs? And specifically, I'm thinking about the HCV program. I was trying to look and see which ones were funded by the federal, and some of them I wasn't sure, but.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, Commissioner Carter. A majority of these programs rely on local funding or state funding, with the exception, obviously, of the HCV homeownership program. At this time, from the information we've received from HUD, we anticipate that our regular allocation that we receive monthly will continue for the foreseeable future. And so because of that, we're working to continue to meet our utilization goals under the program until we hear differently. So.
And what happens if they do just stop funding that program? I mean, we've only got one person that's almost through the process, but and maybe that's not an at-risk program, but I guess I'm just thinking about.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner, specifically for the home ownership portion, you mean, or for the Housing Choice Voucher Program in general?
Both, I guess.
Yeah, so I will say at this time we have not, so our general information so far is that while there are a lot of things happening at the federal level, we don't have any concrete information about the Housing Choice Voucher Program specifically. Right now, we're optimistic, as Anna said, that we will continue receiving that allocation. Down the road, that program receives it's a significant portion of our funding. It's $6 to $7 million. So I think we'll have to just be nimble and devise a solution depending on what those reductions look like. The HRA could devise programming to try to fill any gap according to our budget. So that type of reduction would not be something that we could make up with the HRA levy, but we could explore additional programming. Also, there's some state funding coming in this space for a state-funded voucher program, so that might be another option to fill the gap. As of right now, we're kind of just making sure we're being aware of any federal announcements in this space, and then, again, it'll really depend. I think it's quite unpredictable in terms of what that will look like and when it will happen, and so we're just trying to be conscious of our programming and what opportunities we do have, and moving forward with the funding that we're receiving as scheduled.
Does this fall under the same umbrella as Section 8?
Yes.
So I have a concern because they are looking at reducing Section 8. So even though they're not talking about HCV specifically, we need to be looking at a second choice or an alternative plan for sure.
Yeah, agree. And I would say for HCV home ownership, I think that one specifically because there's the longer term 15-year obligation. If all of a sudden, if this year we'll be, say, 5 people, 5 households get through the process, and then we have a 15-year obligation, and then that funding, the program is gone. What does that mean for the city? What liability does that mean? I mean, obviously, we don't want to see anybody lose that, but then also, is the HRA then obligated for the next 15 years to figure out some way to pay that? Or anyway, and maybe you may not have those answers right now, but I guess I'm just thinking, like, with that kind of looming risk, do we push pause on this one specifically, knowing that there is a risk that the funding might not even be there? And we don't have to answer any of those questions tonight, but I guess it just, I feel worried about the the entire program, but then as we're talking about home ownership and the long-term implications if the program isn't there. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Cardinal. I will just say, in the event that our funding is reduced, our admin plan kind of walks through how we would make decisions around what's the first step, what's the second step in terms of making sure that we're, for as long as possible, meeting the obligation of the HAP contracts that we've signed for both rental assistance and for the HCV homeownership program. I think the one thing that's special about the HCV homeownership program is it's not actually creating a new voucher. So this is a household we're already assisting. We're just assisting them in a different way. And so even if, for example, we were to decide not to move forward, that household is someone we're already serving through the program. And I think that's an important nuance, because while we're committing to them in a different way through the HAP contract to the HCV homeownership program, they theoretically would already be receiving assistance from our office for potentially that 15-year time frame too. So
that's really helpful, clarifying information. And I think what worries me, though, is if all of a sudden those vouchers go away and then somebody is living in a house with a mortgage and they can't make the mortgage payment, what does that do for them and their family? So, obviously still a big deal if they're renting and they lose the voucher, but to have the obligation of a mortgage and all of that, that's, I think, what worries me. But thank you for clarifying on that it's not different vouchers.
Okay. I actually have unless you have something to add, I have a question about the down payment assistance program that you're partnering with Habitat for Humanity. Is that open to, and I think you said any Bloomington resident, or are there qualifications for, I know there's usually income qualifications, but do they already have to be in a program, housing program within Bloomington?
I'm not sure on this.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Well, we're partnering with Habitat for Humanity for down payment assistance. And I think on the one slide, it said it's open to the public, and I just wanted clarification if it is, or if you already have to be involved in a housing program in Bloomington.
Yeah. Chair and Commissioners, I'm actually not sure the answer to that question. I believe it is open, but they'll be handling the bulk of the recruitment, but that's something we can double check and verify and get back to you on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mua?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think you all know I'm very supportive of the home ownership process, right? And the one piece that I've been thinking a lot about lately is the increase in home prices, as well as the less increase in careers. And when I think about homes, those two go hand in hand. When home prices increase, how do people afford houses when their salaries aren't keeping up? And I did some quick math, right? So for the rental for future home buyers, 61 homes purchased since 93, so that's 32 years. That's less than 2 a year that we're getting. So the piece that I see that we're possibly missing, and I'm wondering if we have partners is do we have career coaching opportunities to help people level up in their careers, to increase their earnings, because I think that leads to a lot of more opportunity for home ownership, especially when the home marketplace. If you bought a home before 2020, you were able to capitalize on double-digit growth over the last 5 years, whereas if you aren't, you've been trying to save and your career just isn't progressing, there's no way you can capture that and get into it now. So that's my question is, do we have any partnerships or possible opportunities to increase that career coaching that goes hand in hand with the home ownership piece?
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Commissioner Mua. I would say a few components, specifically with the Rental Homes for Future Home Buyers program. There is a component of the program that's annual goal setting, and at a bare minimum, part of that goal setting is how are we evaluating overall household income and pursuing opportunities to increase that household income. That's part of the conversations that we're having annually with the households. On top of that, the partners that we work with for Journey to Homeownership and Homestretch, so PPL and potentially other partners, also have financial counseling as part of their like programming that they generally offer. And so I know for some households that's something that they've already taken advantage of when they've connected to PPL through the Journey to Homeownership program. So it's happening somewhat, but it's not, again, as you're mentioning, kind of like a targeted requirement for the program at this point, but it's definitely something that we can explore as part of that contract too.
Yeah, I'd love to see what opportunities we have to increase both levers. So thank you.
Well, I might just add, Chair and Commissioners, that the turnover for this program is also fairly low. It's a longer term program, so I think we're getting turnover of between 3 and 5 a year. So having an average of about 1 to 2 who are then graduating to own their own home is a fairly high success rate for this program. But yes, as Anna said and as we've discussed, I think we are exploring additional partnerships, and we can continue to do so to make that success rate even higher.
Any other questions? Comments? Thank you.
Yep.
All right. The next item of business is the Heights Tax Increment Financing District. May we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So a familiar item tonight is the Heights, and we're looking tonight specifically at a component of the financing package, which is the Tax Increment Financing District. So to ground you again with this project, this is the 30-unit condominium over on Xerxes Avenue South. The project is a comprehensive renovation of their parking structure, which was had its certificate of occupancy revoked by the city in August of last year. The project will also include replacement of balconies that are not compliant with building code, and it will include improvements to building accessibility that are required by building code. And there are no zoning or land use changes that would result from this project. And then also I mentioned that as a result of this project, the building will be able to meet its requirements for parking minimums that are imposed through our zoning and land use. Can you go to the next slide, please? I don't know, my clicker died. So, thank you. So I've listed some of the recent actions that are pertinent to the current application for HI financing. This leaves off the 7 or 8 years previous that included the prior 2 applications for HI financing. So as you're aware, the HRA, you as a body, approved, made a recommendation for approval of the requested housing improvement area back in October, and that initiated this process of it moving through approvals, which included the City Council and its public hearing. And then we've continued to implement the components of the financing package, which do include the tax increment financing district. And so as part of establishing a TIF district, there was a public hearing last night, and we did receive some public testimony which emphasized the urgency of this project. And so then tonight we have the HRA's consideration of establishing that TIF district, and then later on in the presentation I'll go through next steps with the project as a whole. So what was approved in that HIA financial package is this list of items, and the different components allow for a level of affordability that staff were comfortable recommending for approval. And that was changed from the previous 2 HIA applications in which staff felt that the financial burden resulting from the requested HIA was too extreme financially. So the significant interfund loan from the HRA provides low interest financing that increases the affordability of the loan, and then establishing a TIF district decreases what the homeowners will have to pay. And then finally, there was an approval for investment of local affordable housing aid through a direct income-based assistance program, and that's for $250,000, which we have begun administering. There were 8 applicants, 6 of whom qualified for the assistance. 5 of those applicants are owner-occupied households, and 1 is a unit that is rented. And so that unit will have affordability restrictions. So we'll continue moving forward with those units that have been, we've had funding committed to them. So altogether, this package makes for a more affordable HIA request. So part of tonight, so tonight we're considering the approval of a redevelopment TIF district, and to make that approval, there are statutory findings that have to be made. So I'm going to briefly go through an overview of what those findings are. So the first is that the TIF district and the project qualify for a redevelopment district, and the way to make that finding is to complete a substandard structure assessment. And so the city's building official did do that analysis and make that finding, and that was that to bring the building up to code compliance, it's in excess of 15% of the cost to replace the building. And in this case, the cost far exceeds 15% of the value of the building. So that finding was made. The next statutory finding is the but-for test, which is that this project could not occur but for the use of tax increment financing. And in this case, the HRA financial package that was approved by the HRA and the City Council, that requires the TIF component for that level of affordability to be possible. So if TIF were not approved, then that approved HRA package would not be feasible, and there would have to be a restructuring of the project. The next finding is that the TIF plan affords the maximum opportunity for this development, and so we've highlighted that yes, this increment financing allows for the affordability to the Heights owners, and it also increases the security of the bond and the HRA's interfund loan, because as those TIF revenues come in, they'll go to repaying those obligations, specifically the bond primarily. And then the final finding is that the TIF plans conform with general plans for development of the city as a whole, and the Council made that finding at its meeting last night as part of their resolution to approve the TIF district. The Planning Commission considered making that finding at its January 30th meeting, but ultimately didn't vote to make that finding. So staff brought that for consideration to the City Council last night, and they did make that finding. So here is the Heights TIF district, which the project boundary is coterminous with the Heights parcel, and you'll see it includes the 30 condominium units as well as their owned parking units, and that's the squares and circles. This just highlights what staff identified as the city's general plans for development as a whole, and how they align with the TIF plan. So those were highlighted to the council as well last night. And then, as I mentioned, we'll go through these next steps. So this evening, we'll have this consideration for the TIF district. And then if that's approved, then we'll move forward with executing a development agreement between the HRA and the Heights Condominium Association. Once that's in place, then we'll have the ability to deploy financing to begin construction. And in my discussion with the association, they're expecting construction could begin around April and May, and then the expectation is that that would be completed this year in 2025. So remaining items to appear before public bodies are associated with the bond. So we've decided to move forward with what's called a negotiated bond sale, and that will be handled by our municipal advisor, which is Baker Tilly. So they'll conduct an RFP, and banks can submit a proposal to purchase those bonds. And then once that RFP puts forward a proposal, that proposal will go to the City Council for final approval. So that item is expected in spring of this year, and the timing will be determined of when those funds are needed for the construction. And once that's completed, we'll have an understanding of the final interest costs that are relevant to the financing package, at which point the fee per unit will be recalculated, and then those assessments will be sent to the county. And so once those are in place, that begins that 20-year term for that financing. So I've highlighted the development agreement terms that I felt were important to go over as a body, and this is between the HRA and the Condominium Association. So I'll just briefly go through these. The main item that I think the bodies will want to know is that there is an annual reporting requirement that the Condominium Association will make, which includes a report annually on their finances, as well as an annual report conducted by an engineer on the physical conditions of the property after those improvements are made. So that will get some assurity that once the improvements are made, that they stay in good condition and get the longevity that's needed from this improvement. So some of the other terms to highlight are emphasizing fiscal responsibility. So that's that oversight of the financial plan. It's also a requirement that the association will agree to hold a minimum balance within their reserve fund, so that if significant expenses arise, such as there is an expectation that the roof will need replacing, that they'll have that minimum balance in place to make that cost. And then the other term that I wanted to highlight are that if collections of repayments from unit owners exceed what the obligations are, that access gets returned to those owners at the end of the term, which could be at the end of 20 years, or it could be at the point that if enough collections are made, the HRA and the city could choose to repay its bond early if that is part of the negotiated bond agreement, and repay the HRA interfund loan early as well. So those are in consideration as well and incorporated into the development agreement. So with that, I can stand for questions, and we do have this recommended motion.
Commissioner Wooten?
For the annual report from the condominium association, is that a third-party audited report?
Chair and Commissioners, the report would be prepared by the HOA management company, and so that's, in this case, that's Westport.
But is it audited?
Well, the city would have that oversight to make the inquiry on those documents, the backing documents for that report.
I would ask that they be audited. CPA audited.
Other questions? Okay. Before we move to adopt the motion, I was wondering if anyone from the Heights would like to speak? No pressure, you don't have to, but if you want to comment, just keep it to under 5 minutes, or if not, not. And if you could state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Susan Schulberg. I live in the Heights, Unit 105. I haven't prepared anything. I wasn't expecting we were allowed to say something. I hope you folks can help us. I hope you will approve this, because some of us have lived there quite a while, and this is home. It's really hard parking out there on the street all winter long, dealing with winter weather and icy roads and being careful not to fall and break bones. So, yes, please just help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I need a motion to adopt resolution number 2025-7, a resolution establishing the Heights redevelopment project and approving a redevelopment plan, therefore, establishing the Heights tax increment financing district and approving a tax increment financing plan, therefore, and authorizing the execution of related documents.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Wooten and second by Hugeheim. Sorry, I pronounced your name wrong. Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes 6-0. So, next. Okay. Administrator Abe has some updates.
Yes, just a couple of quick notices before we move to the closed session. I wanted to just make you all aware, you may have seen, we've had a lot of conversation about the federal funding tonight. There is a deadline of March 14th for the government to pass basically a continuing resolution to continue spending. If there isn't a resolution passed on the 14th, that would result in a federal government shutdown. So we're just keeping an eye on this, monitoring it. We may have more information for you on March 11th about if there would be any immediate impacts to the HRA as a result of that. Right now, we're looking at records of what's happened in previous shutdowns, and it does look like we received payments on time at that time, but we're still kind of trying to explore options and make sure we have a contingency plan in place if anything were to happen. The next note is just a heads up that we have one meeting scheduled in March only. It's March 11th, the first Tuesday. There is not a second meeting scheduled in March. So just make sure to have that in your heads. You don't need to come for the second meeting in March. And the last thing is that we are considering no longer printing packets for each of the commissioners. You feel free to use your iPads. Also, if you would like a printed packet, definitely we can provide that. We're just not sure if people are wanting them or using them, or if you would like to use an electronic version. So if you would like a printed packet in the future, please just let us know and we can make sure to get one printed for you for the meetings. Is there anyone here that knows you would like a printed packet? Okay, great. Yes. That's great. That's all I have for updates.
Thank you, Chair. So totally understand not printing the packets. Can we at least get the agenda printed? I like
Yes.
to take notes on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so now we need a motion to go into a closed session.
So moved.
Moved by Doblinger and second by Commissioner Wooten. Oh, directing the closure of a public meeting, okay.
And then our attorney.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we close the meeting, our attorney would like to say a few words.
Give Mary Chris a second. Mary Chris, Melissa said it's okay. We'll just go to the closed session. So it's okay. We'll just go to the closed session.
Okay, we are now in our closed session and,
Give the tech a minute.
pardon?
Give the tech a minute still.
Oh, I
just
thought
to get
they
set up. Yeah.
were done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. No, she's not.
and the time is 7:14.
So we'll give tech just a minute, and then we'll move to the open session.
Are we ready?
Are we good?
So are we ready?
One more second.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We are back to the open session, and I will need a motion to authorize and direct staff to take actions consistent with a discussion during the closed meeting.
Moved.
So,
Second.
okay, moved by Commissioner Wooten and second by Doblinger to authorize and direct staff to take these actions consistent with the closed meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Right, that is the end of our agenda. So now I have, need a motion to adjourn the Tuesday, February 25th, 2024 HRA Board meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Wooten and second by Commissioner Mua. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.